Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today I want to talk a little bit about the Tales of the TARDIS Pyramids of Mars edition. This just aired on BBC4 and is basically another instalment of Tales of the TARDIS, which premiered last year, which is essentially omnibus cuts of existing Doctor Who stories bookended by either a Doctor or some companions or both, sort of detailing the story inside the memory TARDIS. Obviously this time's a bit different, because Pyramids of Mars obviously features Sutekh, who is returning in this series' finale, and therefore features Ncuti Gatwa and Minnie Gibson bookending both the beginning and end of the story. Before I get into all the details though, I just want to detail my personal experience with Pyramids of Mars. This was one of the first classic Who stories I saw. I think first was Tomb of the Cybermen, then it was Genesis of the Daleks, then it was Destiny of the Daleks, because I wanted to see the sequel to Genesis after loving that so much, and let's just say that was a bit of a disappointment. And the very next one after that was Pyramids of Mars. And I watched Pyramids of Mars, and I was just so transfixed by it. Sutekh, ever since, has been one of my favourite all-time Doctor Who villains, and one that I wanted to see back ever since I first saw Pyramids of Mars. So, from that perspective, it was a really nice opportunity to revisit the story, and I can imagine as well, for younger fans who perhaps haven't seen the story, having a cut-down version to, I believe it was about 75 minutes, might help them get through it, because obviously classic Who pacing can be difficult for younger people, myself included. You know, there are some classic Who stories where, you know, we all think it, where it's like part 3 or something, and we're starting to think, oh, dragging on a bit now if it's like a 6-parter or something like that. But Pyramids has always been one that I've thought was excellently paced, and luckily I think this edit retains that. I would say that this is a massive step up from the previous year's Daleks in Colour, which if you watched that, you'll know, given that it was a 75-minute omnibus version of a story that was 6 parts long, I felt that there were too many scenes of that, essential scenes, that were cut. I think the cuts here were a lot less egregious. They felt a lot more natural. Most notably, near the beginning of the story, you have the exchange between the Doctor and Sarah, where he mentions that Victoria wore the dress that Sarah Jane is wearing in this story. And some people have also pointed out the production mishap hand that you see on Sutekh's chair has been removed. Rest in peace, production manager hand. You will be missed. Getting into the opening and closing segments, they're both quite short, but they're both very interesting. As I said, it has Ncuti Gatwa and Minnie Gibson inside the memory TARDIS, which, while they weren't in at the end of Legendary Review Sunday, it is established that in the time window, the TARDIS is almost solid, and the Doctor has the line of, if time is memory, then what's the memory of a time machine? So I'm assuming that that's how the memory TARDIS comes into existence, and that's the reason why Review Sunday is sent to the time window at the end of Legend Review Sunday, but I digress. The scene opens with them both in quite apocalyptic looking clothes, obviously in the memory TARDIS set that we've seen previously, and the Doctor is detailing how he fought Sutekh before, and Ruby's like, well, if you've done it before, you should do it again. And he said, I barely escaped last time, and then he recounts the events of the episode. We get a really nice mention of Sarah Jane Smith and how much he loved travelling with Sarah Jane Smith, which I thought was really, really lovely. And then the bookending scene I thought was quite interesting, where they explicitly mentioned that Sutekh's form has evolved since the last encounter the Doctor had with him. Previously, he was a humanoid figure confined by the Osirans without the ability to move. Now he is a Titan who takes on the form of a giant jackal-like dog. I'm hoping, though, that we still see a version of the original design, just because I think that design is so iconic, and that is Sutekh, and obviously I don't mind the dog design at all. I think the dog design is done very, very well. But personally for me, I do hope we see at least a version of the mask, even if it's fleeting, or maybe it's like a construct or something like that, or it's in the mist that we see in Legendary Sunday, because I think that design is just so pivotal to Sutekh, along with Gabriel Wolf's iconic voice as the character. And it's amazing to me how even though he's 91 now, he sounds pretty much identical to how he does it. It's kind of mad. But the Doctor, interestingly, in these scenes is very defeated. He's very worried about the prospect of a return to Sutekh because, as I said, he only just managed it last time. And we also get that really nice line of him being a different man back then, and Ruby would hardly recognize him, which I thought was lovely too. In terms of the actual edit of the story itself, some of the things I wanted to highlight were, most prominently, the tunnel with which Sutekh comes through in the story. The effect for that has been changed from the weird rainbowy effect we had in the classic serial to the 2024 time vortex. Now, I can imagine this being a bit of a controversial change because obviously it wasn't there in the original and it's quite different from the original. But personally, I quite like it, and here's why. From a narrative perspective, the sarcophagus is acting as a time window. And at the end of the story, spoilers for a story from the 70s that just got replayed, the Doctor uses a piece of the TARDIS console to trap Sutekh inside the time vortex. So the reason I like this is because it kind of, for the sake of Legendary Sunday and Empire of Death, it makes it very explicit that by Sutekh being stuck in the time vortex, he could have very easily latched onto the TARDIS at some point, likely in between the events of Star Beast and Wild Blue Yonder, in order to enact his plans here. So personally, I think making it the 2024 time vortex explicitly was a good move. I think for the sake of this story and the stories to come, I think it works well. I didn't think that was too intrusive. We also get a couple more like VFX changes in terms of like the effect on the sort of key guarding the force field surrounding the house and guarding the rocket. We also, one of my favourite little tweaks that Ben Cook mentioned on Twitter, was the fact that when the Doctor is interacting with Brother Scarman's radio telescope, it plays a bit from Logopolis, and that's a fun little nod because Logopolis, Tom Baker's final story, everyone will know that the way he goes out is he falls off a radio telescope. So having it play the Logopolis music when he's interacting with a radio telescope, I just thought that was fun. That was a nice bit of foreshadowing for fans to go, I see what you did there. I liked that. That was nice. There was also like a new Mars shot, which I thought was really nice. Overall, I think this reminded me a lot of the collection edits of classic Doctor Who stories. Obviously, they removed the closing credits and cliffhangers from this, but I thought that worked quite well. And as I said, the updated VFX very much put me in mind of things like the collection box sets, where you'll get new planet shots and new laser shots and that kind of thing. Interestingly, they didn't update the beam Sutekh emits to control people and control the Doctor, which is one of the things I was certain they were going to update. Not that I thought it looked bad at all, but because it is a more retro effect, if that's the word, that's the sort of thing that I was imagining they would change, but they didn't, which I thought was interesting. I thought the music for the brief Tales of the TARDIS segments, where it is Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson, was really nice. Sort of a homage to the original soundtrack, but with a bit of a New Who twang to it. Really, really liked that. I liked the fact that they highlighted in the Tales of the TARDIS intro the colonialist aspect to the story, with obviously Marcus Sharman trying to basically invade this tomb to find, you know, ancient artifacts from another country. I thought that was really, really good, really, really well done. Another edit I saw was the bit where they go to the destroyed 1980 following Sarah's suggestion that they could just go to the future, which now that I think about it, it must have been a very deliberate thing to basically redo that scene in the Devil's Court, with RTD being fully aware that he was going to bring back Sutekh. Once again, very, very clever, but I liked the shots of the newly destroyed Earth. And just things like that, they're nice little tweaks. They don't feel egregious, because sometimes they do. Some edits of classic Doctor Who stories, for me at least, they feel a bit egregious. I felt in some places, Daleks in Colour felt a little bit like that. Not all the time, but there were some bits where I was like, I don't know whether I'd have cut that, or I don't know whether I'd put that in there. I don't know whether that really works with the tone of the story. This doesn't feel like that. I think that's largely because this required less work to really change. As far as I'm aware, there's already been a version of Pyramids of Mars that was an omnibus edit anyway, so I imagine that, you know, it's an easier story to edit. I don't think it's as long as the Daleks. Additionally, you're not having to worry about colorization or rescoring or anything like that. It is just a case of tweaking the effect, cutting it down to a clean, I think it is around 75 minutes, and let the rest speak for itself, and it really does. What more can I say about this that hasn't already been said a million times? It's Pyramids of Mars. It's one of my favourite classic Doctor Who stories. Obviously, all the original performances are still intact. This is personally one of my favourite Tom Baker Doctor performances. He feels so detached and so other and so alien in this story particularly, and that's something I would like to see a bit more of in the new series, if I'm honest. Because as much as I like the Doctor having an element of relatability with humans, I do like the scenes where he sees a man die and just has to move on and get on with it and doesn't really stop and reflect on that because he's so used to it. I think that's really, really interesting. I am curious to see how they're going to deal with the Osiris aspect of Sutekh's origin, because of course they've gone to great lengths of establishing him as a god, which invariably he is. You know, many people see him as Satan within the Doctor universe. But of course, he's not a god in the same way the Maestro or the Toymaker are, in the sense that he is an alien species, a very, very advanced alien species, beyond the Time Lords even, but still an alien species. So I'm wondering if they're going to keep that in, or say maybe the Osirans are maybe the originators of a lot of mythology for humanity, or something like that. I'll be interested to see how they deal with that. I did notice they cut down the puzzle sequence a little bit, which, to be honest, I think is one of those things you can cut down a little bit. I love that they kept the moment where the Doctor and Sarah turn away from the mummy. Absolutely classic stuff. Loved that. The only other real criticism I have of this is less so the edit of Pyramids of Mars itself, and more so the opening and closing bits. Mainly, I think they could have done a little bit more with them. Given the fact that the previous Tales of the TARDIS entries have about 10 minutes of dialogue between the Doctor or the companions, whoever it is for the respective story, and I think that really adds to these releases. I think it's a shame that the segments with Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson are as brief as they are. I think you could have really delved into that. I know obviously you don't want to tread on Empire of Death's toes too much, but I feel like by the sheer fact of this existing, and obviously we don't know how Ruby and the Doctor made it to the memory TARDIS yet, it already does that a little bit, so you might as well go the whole gamut and just have a bit more dialogue in there between the two, I think, personally. Maybe they were on limited time, who knows? Maybe they were on limited time, who knows? I wasn't there. But I do just think it was a bit of a missed opportunity to not have them do a little bit more, have a little bit more of the Doctor as he is now, reflecting on Sutekh, stuff like that. I think it would have just been nice. Although one other thing I'll mention is, and I know this was the case in the previous Tales of the TARDIS, but I can't get over how they use a mini version of 13's console room as a fireplace. That's a genius use of that console room, and I think it's really, really fun. But yeah, that's about all I have to say. Let me know what your thoughts were on the Tales of the TARDIS, Pyramids of Mars, Doctor Who thing. If you're American, my sincerest apologies, both for not being able to access this and just generally. But if you did enjoy, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new. That would be very much appreciated. We just hit 24,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for that. Really, really does mean a lot. You'll hopefully, all being well, get some sort of video from me tomorrow covering Empire of Death when it comes out. But of course, I will be seeing it in the cinema, so I might as well say, if you're going to Odeon in Cardiff, you might see me there. Feel free to say hello. But I'll hopefully be able to get back with enough time to at least record some initial thoughts on Empire of Death once it's come out. But with all that said, thanks for watching, and I will see you later.